on it. And details of that particular channel or outlet, So this is part C of the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. And today's Fleet Street papers are Wednesday, 14th of October 2020. And we have been discussing at length the stupidity of the Rupert Murdoch-owned Times and controlled Times newspaper, running the first of three editorials today. The first one being a promotion of the elected mayor post. And in the last paragraph, it is saying that it is no wonder some that is mayors, most of the time in the bully pulpit rather than the corridors of power. Mr. Johnson was no stranger to similar tactics in his 8 years at City Hall in London. But the answer to criticism from regional leaders is not to resist it, but to empower them. In last year's Queen's speech, the government promised to reorganize local government and devolve more power to mayors. It should press ahead and allow England's regions to level up themselves. Now, this is too loaded a piece of corruption that needs a longer examination than just another paragraph length. So, how corrupt the mayor system is and why the Queen's speech was wrong? Because it was stuffed with the contents wanted by the operators who control the government, whatever the surface or facade of the government is in this country. Now, reorganize local government. Local government and reorganization, these are completely impersonal, anti-democratic, contemptuous words and phrases that disrecognize the people in local councils areas. Local government means local councils. And government is an elevated term, which is misleading on all levels, on all counts. And it needs and warrants and merits serious denunciation and rejection simply based on evidence. So here is this third part of our diagnosis of Fleet Street today. And the Fleet Street today has so far been the focus being on the Times's editorial, which is Mea Culpa, which is asking Boris Johnson to recognize the voice of what it calls the tribunes of the local communities affected by the handling of the COVID-19 disaster. Now, the Times is not, as I have said, when I write for the Times or to the Times for publication, not for the Times, because I have not been a kind of staff writer on the Times, but I have written letters and some has been published. But the ones that never got published were the ones that I wrote during the the first half of the 1990s. And the woman called Libby Parvarts, I call her Parvart because she is cruel, and she is as cruel as Margaret Thatcher was, or a Thatcherite kind of cruel person. And she was unduly given platform by the BBC on the Today program as a presenter. Now, Libby Parvers had written a piece in the Times where she is a regular kind of columnist, condemning opponents of cruelty to cats. And I then wrote a series of letters, and the editor at the time was Paul Decker, who later became editor of the Daily Mail and now is being kind of positioned to take over as the chief of the corrupt outfit called Ofcom, which is the broadcasting regulator, so-called. It is nothing of the sort. Now, Decker never allowed any of my letters to be published, and I wrote various lengths of arguments and objecting to Libby Parvar's cruelty promotion. She was supporting cruelty to animals, and cruelty in particular to cats. And the evidence from that time about the Times newspaper being dishonest or dishonestly edited became clear on all major issues at all major times. And this is the one that actually sums up that kind of corruption raging at the Times. And of course, the event of the obituary on Harold Evans that the Times published, as discussed by Private Eye fortnightly, this current issue, backs up that idea and the analysis that the Times is dishonestly edited and corruptly edited. Now, if the Times is dishonest and corrupt in its editorial policy, then what chance is there of any of the other titles, including the stablemate of the Times that is owned by Murdoch, both of the titles, the Times and the Scum. Scum is the kind of evidential name for the Sun. And we have discussed the Scum, and we shall discuss the Scum in the future again, as we have done it before, because of the evidence will be warranting further discussion. Because the evidence that emerges after every rigorous examination of every role played by the Scum warrants the designation Scum and demands that something has to give. That is to say, that the behavior of the tabloid paper, which the Scum is the kind of leading model of in terms of the numbers of people that are still gullible enough to subsidize it as its kind of buyers and readers. The evidence is that the tabloid papers are misinforming the public that buys, the gullible's majority, that buys the paper, and by definition, they would not continue to be buying the paper unless they were in the main fans of the papers, if you like. The Scum, and it's a lesser kind of numerically, lesser circulated forms the Daily Mail, and even lesser is the Daily Express, and even lesser than that is the Daily Star. So these are the papers, the tabloids, that are still capable of being called accurately mass circulation newspapers. Whatever the mass is, doesn't matter. It is still, the mass is bigger than any of the other kind of so-called, what used to be called broadsheet. It's the format in which these are printed. So the broadsheet is still available here in the Boris Club. This is a broadsheet newspaper. That is the format, the size. the size of it, the broadsheet. That is the size. The tabloid is also a name based on the size of it. That's the tabloid size. And the Times has become a tabloid size, but it's not a tabloid by definition. The tabloid newspapers are called so, or so called, because of the particular style of journalism, so called, and the particular kind of orientation and the kind of agenda and the narrative, which in the case of the Fleet Street ones, they're all racist, all imperialistic, all hatefully anti-migrant. And in the context of the last 30 years, I say 30 years because the 30 years is counted from the launching of Saitan Rushdie as the tool, Muslim named tool to attack the Muslims. Whatever the motivation, the details of the motivation behind that agenda being launched in the late 1980s, it was the new approach to racism that was added to the already existing pervasive racism in Britain. And the attack on Muslims was twofold. One was Muslim and one was most of the Muslims were not Europeans, and they're coming from Africa and mainly Asia. Now, this is the tabloid paper. This is the tabloid Daily Mail. And extending that definition of light-hearted or lightweight, rather, insubstantial and prejudiced kind of journalism that can be applied to the broadcast version, the TV programs or TV stations that are called tabloid television. Because of that, it is based on the model of the tabloid newspapers in Fleet Street, for example. Now, we have discussed the stupidity on the facts of the times, and we have extended the discussion by giving an exclusive version of another commentary on Roxana Fiaz. Roxana Fiaz is currently the elected mayor at the expense of, that is against the people of Newham in East London, within Greater London. And Roxana Fiaz approached me from behind at the East Ham Town Hall on the 4th of September 2018. And she generally thanked me for what she said was me holding them to account. And this is a quote from her, if I can find it. Fiaz's she said to me on the 4th of September 2018, that she wanted basically to thank me I'm going to quote her exactly as I can. For the records, because this is very important. Yes, this is Roxana Fia's exact words that I'm quoting. She told me on the 4th of September 2018. in the East Ham Town Hall in the Barking Road, as far as I can remember, on the 4th of September 2018. I just wanted to say thank you for coming and for observing and for scrutinizing it, because it's really important that we make everything transparent. Now, when she says coming in there, she meant my coming, that is going to observe her cabinet meeting as mayor, held earlier, minutes earlier, at the same East Ham Town Hall. So that is what she actually, her gimmick or gambit was, the opening gambit was that she wanted to thank me for coming, that is going to East Ham Town Hall, and for observing her meeting and for scrutinizing the meeting, because it really was important to her that she and her cabinet made everything transparent. And I say a few things about, and we have a discussion, very short discussion about Robin Wales. And then she says, just before she left the conversation, again, she refers to transparency and my role in making that kind of playing that part. She attributed or credited me for that. She said, and it's all happening anyway. So thank you for providing that transparency as well. So she talked about transparency twice, and she talks about transparency both times, thanking me for that. Now that is what she did on the 4th of September 2018. And she approached me from behind while I was talking to an employee of Neom Council who was at that time, for that evening, standing in for the normal receptionist. And I was in the middle of telling that person that I had never met Roxana Fiaz, and I was only there to observe what she was doing as the newly elected mayor, because that was only the 4th month since she got in. She got in May 2018, and that was September 2018. So May, June, July, August, September, the 4 months. Now, when she talked about transparency, as I said earlier, she must have done that as part of a kind of habit or part of a gambit that she actually employs in order to come across to people she wants to ingratiate herself to, for whatever reason, as being reasonable and sensible and not kind of secretive. If that is the case, then Roxana Fiaz is a liar to this day, because this is more than 2 years since that conversation took place, in which she openly and uninvited approached me and thanked me for holding her to account in order that they become transparent, and in order to establish that she was being transparent, and that is very similar to being accountable. And as I've said, in the 2 years, there have been literally hundreds. And here is one email address that has been used to send her emails since that time, because the first email I sent to the person called Adrian May. Adrian May is the kind of assistant director, that is the kind of status, and he is the therefore team leader for the thing they call democratic services. And as a constitutional lawyer, I always go for the formally published kind of status holding. Hello? Who is that? Amazon delivery. Sorry? I've got this one for there.
They are not there.
I don't know them.
Just some of them. Just
No, I don't know them, so I don't want to be responsibility. Do you understand?
is it safe?
No, I can't be responsible. Do you understand? You can understand my reason. So that was a person delivering something for the next door. And I think it is on the record what I said to that person. I said that I don't know these persons, whoever they are, and I don't want to be responsible for a parcel that was being left for them with me. So I didn't accept that. Now, that is the kind of ease of having a live kind of broadcast from the lockdown location. Now, this is the kind of narrative that I believe in, transparency in action. So when Roxana Fia said to me twice on the 4th of September 2018 that she appreciated my role, my coming there, going there, and holding her to account to the extent that she was being, or to the extent that she was being observed by me as to whether she was being transparent or not. That showed that she appreciated that. So in that time, since the conversation she started on the 4th of September 2018, I sent an email at 14:09 hours UK time, which would be whatever the time into September, it would be 13:09 GMT to Adrian May. Adrian May is the team leader for the democratic services. That is what they call the team. In other words, it used to be called in older times, in some decades ago, the committee clerk in councils. The clerks who clerk or staff the committee meetings, because councils mostly were run as committees, and persons in the council's employment were working as maker of notes, writers of notes, and distributors of papers, agendas, etc., etc. So Adrian May is now kind of the occupant or bearer of the grandiose description. He is the team leader for the team called Democratic Services. And I sent that particular one at 13:09 GMT, that is to say 14:09 UK time on the 5th of September, as a typo. And the typo, I'm explaining that here. And the part of the paragraph or the sentence where the typo had been corrected reads this: say due etiquette for obvious reasons and any possible follow-up arrangement because of what Roxana told me when she thanked me there. So the concept of thanking is there already. On the day after she thanked me, I recorded the fact that she thanked me in my communication or communications sent to Adrian May, the head of the Democratic Services team, who is also in post now as an assistant director in the London Borough of Newham. So what I said in that email, the original email sent at 14:07, which would be 13:07 GMT, which was actually transmitted at 14:08 in the email communication. And I sent it to just him. And it is headed final version. Dear Mr. May, following up incomplete conversation that Roxana Fiaz had started at the reception after last night's cabinet and mayoral proceedings meeting. This is to get the facts right. I'm sending you this email as I could not comment fully on what Roxana had been saying when she approached me at the reception. and thanked me for observing the meeting. And a person, a female whom I had never seen or had any contact with at all, interrupted me from my right, as I said before, that side, right? Within brackets, Roxana was standing to my left as she was in conversation with me, while John Gray stood in front, a reasonable space away, and addressed me. I cannot remember the exact words, but she said, this particular person, words to the effect that I had to end the conversation. This other person of either Caribbean background, African background, it was a black person of either Caribbean or African description. I felt her style, words, speech to be abrupt, disrespectful, and inappropriate. Why did she do any or all of that? I think I have since done the research and established who she is. It is most likely that she is one of the clique, one of the plotters that Michael Gillard names in his book that was published later in 2018, but not with my knowledge or within my knowledge or to my knowledge at the time that I had this meeting with or conversation with Roxana Fias, which was interrupted by this person, or when I sent this email or the series of emails. The fact of Michael Gillard's book became known during 2019, although it was published in 2018. The main details of the book became public knowledge in 2019. But I had, in 2018, in October 2018, I had a glimpse of what this book was about, but not fully until later and until the calendar year 2019. We'll come to that in due course. So this person, I was being reasonable, polite, communicative, all in context and in accordance with the letter of our plans to and context of our speech to me. This is the going back to another. A person, a female, whom I had never seen or had any contact with at all, interrupted me from my right and addressed me. I cannot remember the exact words this person said to me, but she said words to the effect that I had to end the conversation. I felt her style, words, speech to be abrupt, disrespectful, and inappropriate. Why did she do any or all of that? That is the question I was putting to the council, to Roxana Fias actually, through my email addressed to and sent to Adrian May, the team leader for the Democratic Services in the London Borough of Newham. For a start, I had not started the conversation at all. It was Roxana Fias who had done that. I was being reasonable, polite, communicative, all in context and in accordance with the letter of her plans and context of her speech to me. Secondly, I had not spoken to anyone else standing behind me, nor even seen that person who interrupted me until she interrupted me by standing very close to me. She actually stood very close to me, and there was no kind of social distance requirements, but even if there wasn't, there should have been, she should have stayed well away from me. But she stood very close, as if she was physically trying to push me from my spot where I was standing at the reception, which was quite unnecessary, and if seen by a neutral observer, would be treated as intimidating. She was trying to intimidate me to stop the conversation. Who was that person and why did she behave in that way? Did she realize that her abrupt and pressing behavior could be felt as being offensive? That I did feel that anyway, that way. That objectively speaking, anyone else in my position would do the same too. If Roxana had another appointment to go to, I would have no issues and would have ended the conversation with due etiquette and any possible follow-up arrangement. I said you to due etiquette for obvious reasons, and any possible follow-up arrangement because of what Roxana told me when she thanked me there. That is what the word was, not trolled. The original, this version had the word trolled. It was told. That's the typo that I have corrected in the later kind of email transmission of 2 minutes later. How does that other person's behavior tally with Roxana's statement to me there and her administration's aims for the community in Newham? That is what she was saying. She was saying to me, Roxana Fayaz, that she was going to bring an end to the style and the manner and the approach of Robin Wales in Newham. Now, I can say that that conversation was held on the 4th of September 2018. And to this day, as I have said earlier, Roxana Fayaz has not replaced Newham Council's behavior or attitude to the people with any different kind of approach or style or manner, let alone transparency, let alone accountability, as compared to what Robin Wales was doing. So this is the kind of series of emails that I sent to Adrian May on the 5th of September 2018. Now, if we go backwards and kind of look at Adrian May and what else I had said to him, it would look that how many are there? Let me just look at the number of emails that have been exchanged between Adrian May and myself about Roxana Fayaz and about Newham Council. There are, it says, the email system says, this is for the record, this is world exclusive diagnosis of the media, and we are talking about the times of today, asking British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the British government to give more powers to the mayors in this country, the borough mayors and the local mayors and the regional mayors, and give them more money. And we're also looking at the claim in the Times editorial today that the Queen's speech last year promised more powers to the local mayors. And the Times is asking Boris Johnson to hurry up and get on with giving mayors more powers and creating more mayors in England. Okay, so this is the email system that I've used, which says 514 items. So it's not all going from me to him. A very handful of them must have come from him, Adrian May. Yes? And this is Adrian May's kind of email log from me to Adrian May and some from him, contains 514 references, and I can select any at random. And one of the emails that I sent to him before that time, not that date, because I had met Adrian May before the 4th of September. That explains the reason I sent anything to him initially, because I had already met him in June 2018. And the meeting where I had met him was the scrutiny meeting at that time. And I have to say, there is no scrutiny taking place of Newham Council via that scrutiny committee at all. Now, that is another fantasy that is being attached to the presumption underlying the Times's kind of propaganda for more mayors and more powers for the mayors in this country, in England. Because the rationale, the forces that want more powers to mayors and less powers to elected councillors in this country, this is coming from the controllers of the power in this country in the business. And they want to use the councils as extensions of the business of corruption and abuse and denial of the local communities. In fact, they want to do away with councils altogether. So this is the context of the actual propaganda that is represented in the Times, because the Times is still, and it shows how the low level of journalism in Fleet Street, the Times is still rated in the kind of published kind of lists as the leading newspaper of record in this country. Although historically it is more accurate, historically it is no longer kind of actually the newspaper of record in any shape or form, except when the agenda it wants to be used to peddle is the agenda that is accurately represented, accurately representing the script writers and the scripters and the confectors of the agenda. That is the accuracy. That is the record. Otherwise, in terms of the objectivity requirements, in terms of the international requirements of being neutral, the Times is not the newspaper of record. And so therefore, the other thing is that the evidence that I have just now shared on this channel, in this broadcast, about the behavior of Rukhsana Faiz in Newham is in principle representative of the behavior of other mayors in post at the present time. Now, going back to the cost of the work that I've been doing, would David Pennick write 500 emails or get involved in corresponding with Newham Council by sending or authoring or spending the time in authoring and sending hundreds of emails, let's say, because in the log there must be some to me from Adrian May, but the majority are from me. So let's say hundreds of them from me. Would David Pennick, who was hired at a cost of £20,000 fees by an outfit in Manchester about a European kind of club decision, would he have written hundreds of emails? And if he would have, what fees would fit that work? So supposing that every email requires appropriate factual research and investigation and updating, on average, all the work involved in the research, investigation, the authoring, the typing, the dispatch, the transmission, on average, it would take 2 hours. For a good, responsible kind of likeness of my type of length and my types of depth and my type of range, how many emails of that description, of that depth, would David Pennick be able to write in one day? Let's say he won't be able to do more than 4. Unless, of course, he fakes it and steals stuff from other people and copies stuff or pastes stuff. Any genuine kind of engagement in an email is a different form of a letter. So a letter, a good, intelligent, up-to-date, original letter has to take more than 1.5 hours at least. So even if we say 6 hours for 4 emails, and he has to be given a break for his lunch or whatever, At most 5. So 5 emails, and then you multiply the amount. 5 emails for 20,000 pounds a day. So if there are 500, how much is there? And how many people in all of England or in the UK or anywhere else would be able to do that kind of work, which is all investigative work? Investigative work dedicated to investigating the behavior on the ground of one mayor, one council. So the Times is not only wrong, but it's criminally ignorant and stupid. It would be a very serious undertaking to write 500 communications or 450 communications and not get any truthful answer or acknowledgement. Because after she spoke to me on the 4th of September, Rukhsana Fiaz did not answer the questions that I put to her through Adrian May. And here is another calculation I am going to make here. So if it is, let's say, calculated at 5 emails every 20 hours, then 500 would amount to what? 500 would be divided into 100, let's say, days. 5 emails a day, which means 100 days in 500 emails. So it is 2 million pounds at the rate of David Panic. Is there anyone, anywhere, who would have done the equivalent of 2 million pounds worth of work, multidisciplinary work, in investigating the work of Rukhsana Fiaz, one holder of a post in Newham as mayor? Contextually, I knew the first Lewisham mayor decades before he became Lewisham mayor. And I knew him as a paid employee of the Greater London Council. And he was Steve Bullock. Steve Bullock of Lewisham Council, who is no longer mayor, but he became the first mayor of Lewisham. Steve Bullock was employed as an aide to Ken Lying Still Livingston, who was the front man as the leader of the GLC, who had taken over the post of leader by staging the coup against Andrew McIntosh, as I keep saying. That is fact. Andrew McIntosh was the Labour GLC group leader who led the Labour GLC group at the 1981 GLC elections, which he won by defeating the Conservatives. The Conservatives had been led by Horace Cutler. Now, Horace Cutler was defeated soundly by the Labour group led by Andrew McIntosh. Now, McIntosh politically was of a right-wing persuasion. But my examination, evidentially, of his role and his overthrow by the coup led by Ken Livingston Livingstone is nothing to do with the politics of the ideological brand. It's to do with the accountability, transparency, honesty, and integrity of the kind of process which Andrew McIntosh correctly kind of represented and effectively represented by defeating the Conservatives who were in control of the GLC until the May 1981 election. Now, when Ken Livingstone got the power, he appointed various advisors. And in due course, he appointed somebody called Steve Bullock. Bullock was a Lewisham-based kind of Labour Party careerist. And when the GLC was ousted from the county hall following the abolition by Margaret Thatcher of the GLC, I found a huge set of materials, photographic evidence of various activities that Ken Livingstone had been involved in, and literally thousands of pictures were taken of Ken Livingstone's time as the leader of the GLC. And in those pictures, I found Steve Bullock feature as well, not as many times as Ken Livingstone, of course. But my recollection of encounters with Bullock at the county hall were based on his defense of the corruption that I opposed. And as anyone who has been following this broadcast would know, my work, political campaign, is about opposing corruption, amongst other things. Corruption at every level that I can spot and find and identify. So I was having a conversation on what they called the principal floor of the county hall at that time. Principal floor is an elitist term because it was the floor where all the offices of the GLC kind of operatives and post holders and careerists were based. And I remember having a conversation with Bullock. It was an accidental conversation. I had not arranged to talk to him, but he appeared for some reason, and we had a conversation where I pointed out the list of corrupt activities that Livingstone was engaged in, and he defended Livingstone. As far as I remember, he did not swear at me, but he defended Livingstone. The reason I'm saying he did not swear at me is relevant, because years later, when Bullock became the mayor of Lewisham and started to implement very anti-socialist and corrupt measures by abusing his post as the elected mayor of Lewisham, campaigners naturally and predictably and as expected and as it was their right opposed those measures, and he abused them and swore at them. That is the reason why I mentioned the fact that years earlier Steve Bullock had not sworn at me, but he had defended Ken Livingstone. Now, years later, after he kind of swore at people, or around the time he was swearing at people, Steve Bullock was seen in Tower Hamlets In fact, on the 14th of September 2010, 14th of September 2010, Steve Bullock appeared on the top table, as it were, on the kind of stage as one of the endorsers of Lutfur Rahman in Tower Hamlets. On that date, Lutfur Rahman was still the Labour Party's candidate for mayor of Tower Hamlets that was going to be introduced for the first time in this borough. And Steve Bullock was completely unexpected there because, as far as I could remember, there was no trace of Steve Bullock having anything to do with Tower Hamlets in any shape or form, unless he did that as a member of a secret society, by which I meant that there was no publicity and public knowledge of what he did or say or have to say about Tower Hamlets. And yet he gave a spiel at that meeting held at the Troxy in the Commercial Road. And he gave a generous speech and praised Lutfur Rahman to the skies. Now, Lutfur Rahman did not deserve any praise at all because he had no record, full stop. Lutfur Rahman had no record to warrant any public endorsement, let alone in the language that he was being praised in by Steve Bullock. And in addition to Steve Bullock, there was on the stage another very dodgy character who was from the Operation Black Vote. Now, Operation Black Vote, by the very title, is an outlet or outfit for operators or operatives, agents and spies and stooges. And the Operation Black Vote remains the same, discredited and discreditable. Nothing to do with the ordinary black people, whether defined as mainly African origin or as including Asian as well. Because if he didn't include the Asian people, then what on earth was he doing there endorsing Lutfur Rahman? So these two people were outsiders. They were not part of the local community in Tower Hamlets whatsoever. And neither of them had been known to have anything to do with the community at any time, any point. So the introduction of the mayor post in Tower Hamlets was led by outsiders with dubious connection or no connection whatsoever with the democratic defense of rights of the community in Tower Hamlets. That was on the 14th of September, which was of course followed by soon after the Labour Party NEC reversing the decision to allow Lutfur Rahman to stand as the Labour Party's candidate. So within a very short time, maybe within 1 week of 14th of September 2010, Lutfur Rahman was removed and replaced by somebody else. And the events of Lutfur Rahman becoming independent and getting elected in October. This is October. This is within 1 week of the anniversary of Lutfur Rahman getting in as the first elected mayor in Tower Hamlets in October 2010. So the October 2010 through to 23rd of April 2015, the date when the election commissioner Richard Morey declared Lutfur Rahman as not having been elected and declared him not eligible to occupy a public post and position or seek election for 5 years after that date or from that date. So the time seems to be today Wednesday, the 14th of October 2020, completely unaware of what went on in Tower Hamlets between Lutfur Rahman's election, so-called, in October 2010 and his ouster by the election commissioner on the 23rd of April 2015. And we shall be continuing in the next edition.